Okay, welcome back guys to part 2 of 4D. So we were talking about, we had just looked at this example and we saw how as the months progress, the amount of money of your monthly payment that goes to interest actually decreases, and then the amount or percentage of that monthly payment that goes to the actual principal increases. Okay, and so the last thing we had talked about was loan term, and I told you that different term loans come with different interest rates, and typically the shorter the term, the lower the interest rate. Okay, now many times it's not a huge difference, okay, but if you're talking about if you're talking about borrowing a really large sum of money, then just a small difference in interest rate can make a big difference, okay, over the long term. All right, so we have made it down here to credit cards. Okay, so we have talked about this some. Credit cards, are something you've got to be careful with. It's easy to get yourself in trouble with credit cards. Okay, in fact, I applied for one that actually arrived yesterday, and I was looking at some of the paperwork, and it came with, or the particular credit card has a $13,000 credit limit. Okay, so it can be easy to see that and think, oh well, I can go out and get a new whatever, whatever it is that I've been wanting, maybe a new 80-inch television. And another thing, that reason that credit cards can be very tempting, or the abuse of them, is that you can go out and make a significant purchase with one, and then the minimum payments are going to be quite small. Okay, and so that leads people to believe that they can actually afford to use that credit card. But what happens is that those minimum payments are small for a reason, because they want you to pay on that credit card for as long as possible. Let's say you go out and buy something that costs $10,000 and the minimum payments are, I don't know, $70, okay? Or they start out at $70. So what happens in that $70 payment, almost all of that is going to interest, and a very little bit is going to actually pay off the balance. Okay, and so that's why if you only pay the minimum on a credit card, you'll end up paying on that credit card for years, because the credit card companies, they don't want you to pay it off. They want you to they want to be able to keep charging you interest. Okay. In fact, let me pause the video for a second and find, I've got something I want to show you. Yeah, here it is, guys. So what I did is I made this spreadsheet in Excel, and it shows, and I did these calculations according to the rules of, different credit card companies have different rules as to how they calculate what your minimum payment is going to be, but most of them are the same. And so I used the rule that was most common among credit card companies. And so I created this little spreadsheet here, and what it shows is that, let's say you put $6,000 on a credit card, and it'll give what the minimum payment is going to be. Okay, and over here I put an APR, or an interest rate of 25%, which would be pretty standard. We could change this and kind of see how it affects these payments, and also how long it's going to take to pay off the credit card. But let's say the APR is 25%, which is really high. Okay, so you charge $6,000, and then after that first month, you have a minimum payment of $185. Now look at what your ending balance is. The ending balance has only come down $60. So that means of the $185, only $60 went to paying off your credit card. Okay, let's see, I was trying to zoom in. Let's see. Well, here we go. Yeah, and so month 2 rolls around, okay? So now, let's see here. Oh, this is kind of interesting. Well, this is a bit interesting because the balance actually is exceeding what you initially borrowed. So I'm not sure if cells 3 and 4 are quite correct. But in any case, all the cells after that are accurate. And so what happens, let's look down here at, like, you know, I don't know, cell 7. So after 5 or 6 months, look at what you owe. You still owe $5,883.65. But your minimum payment has come down a little bit, okay? Because that balance has come down a little bit. But the ending balance, let's see. Well, I was looking at this. I didn't actually notice that before. I don't know if this is what actually happens. The reason that the beginning balance right here is higher than what you initially borrowed is because so little of this minimum payment went to the principal. And so when that interest got added on, it actually made that beginning balance for that next month higher than it originally was. And I'm not sure if this actually happens or not, because I've never really carried a minimum balance on a credit card. But in any case, guys, what I really want you to focus on is you will notice that as this balance gets paid down, the minimum payments, they are decreasing, okay? And also, you know, you borrow $6,000 and you're not going to have to pay on this until a month or sometimes even 2 months, depending on when the purchase was. And so you're postponing that obligation or that financial responsibility. So that can be tempting. And then furthermore, you say, oh, okay, well, if all I'm going to have to pay is $185, that seems very reasonable. I can afford that. But what ends up happening, and as I scroll down here, is that you'll see this just keeps carrying on. Okay, look, we're down here into months 20, 21, 22, 24. This is already 2 years, and you're still owing about $5,000. So you've been paying on this credit card for 2 years, and you still owe close to $5,000. And now look, let me just keep scrolling. Now you'll notice the balance is coming down, and the minimum payments are coming down. Let's see how long it actually takes to pay off this credit card. Now you're in the hundreds, okay? So right here, this is the point. So the beginning balance is $21.93, and your payment would be $41. Actually, if you notice right here, the payments are $41, because whenever that balance gets down to a certain amount, the payments just stay the same until you eventually pay it off, okay? That's some of the terms or the procedure that these credit card companies use. So anyway, month 205, I was actually looking at the wrong column. Month 205, you've got a balance of almost $22 and you're going to pay it off, okay? So 205 months, let's see how many years that would be. 205 divided by 12. This is not going to be pretty, guys. 17 years, okay? So you only borrowed $6,000, and if you only pay the minimum, it's going to take you roughly 16 or 17 years to pay off that credit card, okay? And it can be even longer if this APR is higher. So you really... you've really got to be careful, okay? But I just wanted to show you that to illustrate the importance of, if you do have to carry a balance, try to get it paid off. Try to pay extra each month if you can. Okay. We'll go ahead and close this file. All right, so let's look at some of this. Yeah, it says credit card loans differ from the installment loans that we talked about above in that you're not required to pay them off in a specific time. Okay, we just saw that. It can take years before you get them paid off. Instead, you're required to make only a minimum payment each month, and that generally covers all of the interest for that month and very little of the principal. Okay, and because of this, it can take a very long time to pay off those credit cards. All right, so let's look at some of these tips. So if you are going to have a credit card, and having a credit card isn't bad, and I'm going to show you a few here in a minute. You definitely want to shop around. If you expect to carry a balance, compare interest rates and annual fees. Guys, I would not have a credit card that had an annual fee. There's too many of them out there that don't. Okay? So make sure that you don't have one that has an annual fee. Compare interest rates. If you will pay off your balance each month, which is what I recommend, and that's what I use my credit cards for, then compare annual fees and benefits. Okay, you don't want an annual fee. And when they say benefits, they mean things like cash back or airline miles. So my credit cards, they give me cash back. So I pay them off at the end of the month, and every single purchase, well, the best credit card that I have, I get 2% cash back. So if I make a purchase of $100, then I earn $2. And after a while, guys, especially if you're paying all your bills with these credit cards, you can build up some cash back. And you can apply that to the balance in the future. Or sometimes you can redeem that cash back for credit card or gift cards and things of that nature. Okay, so you can actually make money if you use credit cards wisely. And then here's the second bullet point. It says, watch out for teaser rates. They may try to entice you to get a new credit card by offering a low starting interest rate. This is very common. Or many credit card companies will offer like 12 months or 15 months with zero APR. And so that just means that you don't have to pay any of the interest those first 12 or 15 months. But what happens is that interest is still building up, and if you don't have that balance paid off after that first 12 or 15 months, then that huge chunk of interest gets tacked on to your balance, okay? And that's how they get people a lot of times. And then typically the interest rate will become a lot higher after those first few months. And then furthermore, never use your credit card for cash advance, except in an emergency. Okay, because not only will credit cards charge you fees, but many times they'll have higher interest rates associated with those cash advances. And then it says most credit card companies will charge interest immediately on cash advances. Okay. And like I said, this would be my tip to you. Always try to pay more than the minimum payment if possible. Okay, this is going to save you a lot of money in the long run. And before we leave this and start talking about mortgages, I went to Forbes here, looked at some of the best credit cards as of March 2025. Okay. And this is a few of them, so let's look at them. Here's a Chase credit card, but it has an annual fee of $95. So I'm not sure I would even consider this one. Now, a lot of credit cards will offer you a welcome bonus. So this one offers you a welcome bonus of 60,000 bonus points. Now, you've got to be careful because a lot of people will see that and they'll think 60,000, that's a huge number. Well, it is a fairly large number, but what does that translate to in dollars? Many times it may take, 1,000 points to be equivalent to $1. And so really that's just $60. Okay, so you need to look at that. And then furthermore, look at the APR. It's variable, meaning that it can change anywhere within this range. And then it'll also list the credit score that you need in order to qualify for this card. But let's look at some others here. Now this one here would be appealing to me simply because it has a welcome bonus of $200. And if you click on here, it says you'll get that welcome bonus of $200 after you spend $500 on purchases within the first 3 months. So I've actually done this several times because I pay all of my bills with credit cards. So I'm going to be putting a lot more than $500 each month on a credit card. So if I'm going to do that, why not get an extra $200 bonus? And furthermore, this credit card has no annual fee. And then I don't even care about the interest rate because I don't ever carry a balance. Okay. And then let's see what else. Here's another one that's got $200 cash back initially. And then lots of times, let's see, let's look at this one. Let's look at it a little more in detail. Let's see here. Card details. Well, it doesn't. Because most credit cards will give you cash back. It'll be like 1% or 1.5%, and sometimes there'll be certain categories in which you can earn 5% cash back. So like I have a Discover card that every 3 months or every quarter it'll have a different category in which I can earn 5% cash back. And I think right now it's for like restaurants. So I don't let that be an excuse to go eat out, but if I do find myself at a restaurant and I'm needing to pay, then I'll try to use my Discover card because I can get 5% cash back. So if I spend $100, then I get 5 of that back essentially. Okay. Let's see. Here's a student. Well, this one has an annual fee. This one doesn't have an annual fee. Come here and see if it get any of the details. Now here's an Amazon credit card. It's through Visa though. I've got one of these as well. And this it tells you that any purchases made on Amazon, you'll get 3% cash back automatically. Or any of these other businesses that Amazon owns, so like at Whole Foods. And then furthermore, you'll get 2% cash back at gas stations, 2% cash back at restaurants, and then 1% cash back on all other purchases. Okay. So anyway, I just kind of wanted to show you that. So hopefully you'll have a little bit of familiarity with credit cards. All right. Let's get back to where we were. All right. So the last thing we're going to talk about are mortgages. Okay. So mortgage is just a fancy name for a house loan. And mortgages are typically installment loans or amortized loans, if you remember. And typically most people finance their house for 30 years. Okay? Although, like I said previously, you can get a mortgage, a 10-year mortgage or a 15-year mortgage. And the interest rates associated with those shorter-term mortgages are typically lower. Now, the loan on a house, typically you're required to have a down payment, okay? And that can vary depending on who the lender is. A good rule of thumb, although most people can't afford this, is 20%. If you can, and that's actually a hurdle for a lot of people. They can't. They have to continue renting because they can't save up enough for that down payment. Usually that's what keeps a lot of people from getting a mortgage or from buying a house. They could afford the monthly payments because they're paying rent somewhere else, but they can't save up enough for that down payment. Okay. So if you're renting, be conscientious of that. Buying a house is not really an investment. but it's a financially more efficient way to live, okay? Because if you're renting an apartment, you're paying rent every month, and you're never going to get any of that back, any of that value, okay? It's gone. But with a house, you're going to have a mortgage payment every month, and part of that will go to the principal, to paying down that loan. And so that house that you're buying has value. So when you look at it from that perspective, yes, you're paying each month, but you are building what's called equity, or in other words, value in that house, so that if you ever want to sell that house in the future, you can actually get a lot of that money back, okay? Sometimes it can be $100,000 or $200,000, depending on how much the house is worth and how much of the mortgage you've actually paid down. All right, and then also when you typically buy a house, there are closing costs, okay? These are basically financial fees that go along with the loan, okay? So these fees of this nature can be, typically a lender will require that you get the house inspected. It'll require that you get the house appraised, and that just means somebody will come out and say, yes, the house is worth what you're asking the bank to give you, okay? Because if it's not worth that, then the bank is not going to loan you that much money, so you have to get it appraised. Typically, if you're working through a real estate agent, they take a fee. So the closing costs can be significant. I'll give you an example. I recently had to refinance my house that was paid for because I got a divorce, and I had to refinance $130,000. Or in other words, I had to take out a loan from the bank for $130,000. That's essentially what I was doing, because I gave my ex-wife $130,000 in equity, and the closing costs on that were over $8,000. Okay, so they're significant, and they would have been even more expensive if I had used a real estate agent. Basically, what we did was, the house was paid for. I just said, hey, we put the house in my name, and I took out a loan against the house and gave my ex-wife $130,000. And so if I had gone through a real estate agent, the closing costs would have been more than that. And typically those closing costs can be added on to the loan. So I ended up financing it was about $138,000. So anyway, be aware of those, okay? And then typically most people obtain what's called a fixed rate mortgage. So that's a mortgage that guarantees that the interest rate will never change, okay? And that's a good thing, guys, because you don't want the interest rate changing typically, because it can be good if the interest rate goes down, but lots of times the interest rate can go up, and then that causes your monthly payments to actually go up. So with a fixed rate mortgage, this guarantees that your monthly payments will stay the same. And what got a lot of people in trouble when we had the financial crisis of 2008 is that a lot of people that should never have gotten mortgages were able to get them, and they defaulted on those mortgages. And they got mortgages in which there was no down payment required, and the rate was not fixed, okay? And so that made it such that their monthly payments kept going higher and higher, and then they couldn't afford the house anymore, and they had to let the bank foreclose on it. So anyway, and then fixed rate mortgages are typically offered in 15 and 30-year loans, with interest rates lower on the shorter term loans, of course, okay? And then also, and I've mentioned this, the more money that you can invest on the down payment, the less money you're going to have to finance, which is a good thing. Not only will that mean you'll have lower monthly payments, but you will end up paying less in interest by the time you pay off that house, okay? And here we have a graphic. This represents a 30-year mortgage, and the payment is $537 a month, okay? And so what this illustrates is that as the years pass, the portion of your fixed $537 payment that goes to interest and principal changes. So initially, most of it's going to interest here, and a smaller amount is going to principal. But notice how this pink curve increases as the time progresses. Throughout the duration of the loan, the more of your payment that goes to principal increases, which means for each month you're going to pay a little bit less in interest. And we've seen examples of that, haven't we? Such that at the very end of the term, that very last payment that you make, almost all of it is going toward the principal, okay? Because you have paid that balance down so much that it's not big enough to really draw any interest anymore, okay? That's why I recommend that if you're financing a house or you have a mortgage, that you always try to pay a little extra toward the principal each month, because that'll help you pay off that house a lot sooner. And I told you last class, I always try to pay, at least maybe $50 or $100 extra each month if I can afford it. Ideally, I like to be able to pay $200 or $300 extra toward the principal. All right, and then the last thing I'm going to mention is adjustable rate mortgages. Well, I mentioned this earlier. Stay away from those, okay? You want a fixed rate mortgage, because if you get an adjustable rate mortgage and the interest rate starts going up, then your monthly payment's going to go up as well. And it can keep going up until you're unable to even make the monthly payments, okay? And there is one last thing I was going to show you. So I mentioned this last class. I pulled up an amortization table. Oops. So this shows you, it's similar to that Excel spreadsheet. This shows you, so let's say here, the loan amount is $15,000. This is the interest rate, 7%. And the length of the loan is 5 years, okay? And so this shows you each month what that balance is going to be. And as you can see here, those payments are fixed. You're paying $297.02 each month. And then over here it shows you how much of that goes to principal and how much of that payment goes to interest, okay? And over here it has this other column, cumulative interest. This is the column that might make you sick to look at, because if you look at it, it'll show you the amount of interest that you've paid since the beginning of the loan. Oops. Okay, sorry about that, guys. And so you can see here, down here at this would be like year 3, because 36 months is 3 years. So the total interest paid is $2,300. Now, this is a relatively small loan, and the interest rate is it's kind of high, I guess, 7%. But if this were like a house, and you were financing $200,000, and you were to look at your amortization table, and you were to look down at maybe year 10 and see how much you've paid in interest, it would make you sick. But anyway, anytime you take out a loan, you should receive an amortization table or schedule that just shows you. Basically, it itemizes everything, okay? So anyway, I just wanted you to have seen that. All right, guys. Well, I think I've tried to share some wisdom or knowledge with you, okay, in the hopes that you'll be able to make wise financial decisions, and that personal finance will not be a source of great stress and worry in your life. Okay. And the last thing I want to say is that it's always possible to save a little bit of money. Okay. I can remember my grandfather, he worked at a shoe factory, and he didn't make much. He really just made enough to survive, for them to survive. He had 4 kids. But he was still always able to save. Okay. Now sometimes, he had to borrow money occasionally for unexpected emergencies, but, he would pay that off. And then, another thing, saving, is for those emergencies. And if you're able to save a little bit here and there, it builds up, especially if you're investing it, okay, like we talked about previously. Then you can earn interest on that money that you've saved, and then it can start building up and building up, okay? So please try to save if you can. And if ever I can offer you any sort of financial advice or advice on investing, although I'm not a financial advisor, let me know. I'll try to help you. Anyway, guys, this concludes the last lecture on 4D, okay?